I think we're more than that, personally. I mean, we have more than just a base drive as a species. I mean, I'd like to think of us as a dignified and...
Food. I need more food. Oh, Grimbo, bring me more food. Johnny is hungry. Johnny is hungry. Obey, Grimbo. Obey.
Ugalas ang kabrahan sila. Asya so ko. Ikarasi.
Bad Grimbo. No curses, Grimbo. Go get Filet-O-Fish. Get Filet-O-Fish. Go get it.
Good. Good, Grimbo. Grimbo lives another day.
Hello, fellow basement dwellers, and in today's video, we are going to be discussing the Doik Eldar, the citizens of Komoa. And for those of you who don't know, this is the 6th part of my whole series. We will be ending on Halloween night. And if you can guess the next faction that will be covered, this will be the final faction I'll be covering in my whole series. I will go back to this video, like, pin your comment, and I will give you a shout out in the next video if you can guess the next faction I will be covering. Like, for example, during my the Monkey Lob episode, if you guess the Doik Eldar, at the end of this video, you'll be getting a shout out. Now, real quick, I'll be getting into why do the Eldar exist, and I will be speed running this because you've probably heard before, and if not, this speed run will leave you a bit confused. So, essentially, a bunch of fat psychic frog got into a war with cancel patients. Cancel patients got defeated, then came back as soulless Egyptian Terminators that were backed up by ancient starry parasite gods, and the fat frogs needed an army to defeat them, and so they created the Eldar. The old ones were defeated, but their creations, the Eldar, did survive and would force the remaining Necrons into hiding. And for 60 million years, the Eldar remained the unchallenged power in the galaxy. The Eldar were... physical labor became a foreign concept. Their wars were not fought by them. They'd simply just hit a button and their battle automatons would take care of it. If they did ever have to get their hands dirty for war, they would show up in this massive, most beautiful continent-sized spaceship you've ever seen, cast a spell and leave. Well, cast a spell that was essentially the Death Star and leave, but you get the point. And the galaxy was their plaything. They outright won 40k. They were so above all of the other races, they didn't even have any, like, formal agreements or treaties with any of the lesser races. It was just, oh yes, the mighty Eldar Empire, unstoppable, all glorious, beautiful, and then minus barbarians. And as dickish and as overconfident and as douchey as the Eldar are, they owned it. They were like the Forerunners from Halo. They were just unstoppable. But when your entire life, you're immortal. You're essentially immortal. Because you live for thousands upon thousands of years. And when you die, you have a whole pantheon of gods that will take care of your immortal soul. And either just take care of you and coddle you in literal heaven, or will send you back down the Eldar society, which is so advanced and peaceful that it's also pretty much heaven. So, having this, be your life for millions upon millions of years, things became quite boring. And so they needed more and more perfect ways of, seeking out pleasure and entertainment. And this started out with, singing, poems, architecture, conquering. But not too long after that, it became, bringing a jackhammer into the bedroom. And other fancy things like that. Like, eating babies, causing a star to supernova, because the only thing you haven't felt in your millions of years of existence is being engulfed in a supernova, so you actually want to feel something for one. And the reason the Eldar had a massive pantheon is to make sure that the old ones weren't stupid, and they knew chaos existed, but chaos wasn't a huge threat. But they knew that having a race of big boy psychos that were meant for war would empower them. So they made them a pantheon to essentially suck up their psychic residue. Also, so that way their souls wouldn't be wall dogging the warp. The old ones pretty much gave the Eldar protection against the warp. And that's why human souls fall to chaos every 6 seconds. The Emperor only gains power and sucks your psychic residue when you're actively worshipping him. When a human wages war, that empowers Khorne. When a human gets sick, that empowers Norgor. When an Eldar wages war, that empowers their god of war, Cain. When an Eldar gets sick, that empowers their god of healing, Isha. So, if, for example, Big E was a true god of humanity, not like a half-baked disappointment of a god that, well, man who doesn't want to be a god, but you get the point. If Big E was actually like a full-on god, not this half-baked god we have now, then mankind would be much more chaos-resistant. We wouldn't be falling every 6 seconds. And that's why the Eldar, for 60 million years, never had a problem with chaos, because, again, they waged a war. Oh, that's fine. All the residue's going to Cain. They do some elaborate trickery. Oh, that's fine. It goes to one of their other gods. But, what the old ones didn't suspect is the Eldar bringing jackhammers into the bedroom and eating babies and reincarnating so they can be skinned alive as a baby, because they've never felt that before, because they felt literally everything, and so everything became numb, so they kept becoming more and more and more degenerate so they could actually feel something, because their heavenly utopia became hell because everything was the exact same. And so all of this excess wasn't going to any of the 3 chaos gods, because, I mean, you had Khorne, god of war, Norgor, god of disease, and Tzeentch, god of magic and trickery. It wasn't going to any of them, because excess wasn't any of their appointments. It wasn't going to their pantheon, because they didn't have any form of, god of excess. Pretty much all of this psychic residue they were creating over the course of millions of years was piling and becoming its own entity in the warp. But because all this excess was, becoming its own entity, it was also... The thing about Chaos Gods, right, is if a Chaos God exists, it always has exists, and always will exist. So although Slaanesh does come into existence around year 30-ish thousand, she has a birthday, but also she was in the war in heaven 60 million years ago, causing a bit of trouble. So, because she existed at some point in time, she's always existed. It's just that her power was very, very weakened then. You kind of get what I'm saying. It's a bit confusing, but I hope you understand. So, because of this, she wasn't just feeding off of the Eldar's excess, although she only exists because of the Eldar excess. She also exists because of all of the excess of all the sentient races. A good example is a demon called Drakneel, came into existence when the very first mortal happened. When Cain killed Abel, Drakneel, the human demon / god... Okay, so demons and gods are pretty much the same. It really just depends on power level. So, demon, let's just say demon of humanity, came into existence then, even though there was only one mortal. One mortal is not nearly enough to create a demon, let alone one strong enough to kill the Emperor. But when that happened, because he came into existence, he drew power from the entire timeline, because he always existed, because he came into existence in the warp. Yeah, warp creatures are very confusing. And so because of that, Slaanesh drew power from all societies, every act of excess. Every time you grabbed a candy bar when you didn't need it, you helped create Slaanesh. So that's part of the reason why Slaanesh... And so that was empowering Slaanesh, but Slaanesh only came into existence because of how degenerate the Eldar are. That's why Slaanesh really doesn't fit in with the other Chaos Gods super well. She's kind of the odd one out, the black sheep, because she's a mix of a Chaos God and a corrupted god of the Eldar. Okay, I am so sorry that you have sat through all of this. At least you now know how the gods of 40k exist. Okay, let's get into the actual Dark Eldar. And so, these disgusting, degenerate pleasure cults, the guys bringing in Jack Hamels into the bedroom, basically became in charge of society. They became the governors, they became the emperors, they became everything. These pleasure cults were not just there, they took charge. And so some Eldar packed up their things and basically became the Eldar Amish in the outskirts of society. Some of these Eldar not only became the general, they doubled and tripled down and moved into a city in the webway known as Komoa, so they could become super rich. And because Komoa was in the webway, their transportation, it was essentially a port city, so they could have unlimited resources to become as sick and degenerate as possible. And then you had, some people who basically got on these continent-wide ships, said, man, you guys are degenerate freaks, and dipped the craft wartles. And so they kept becoming degenerate until eventually Sinesh was born, and 9 out of 10 Eldar were wiped out immediately. Every single planet that the Eldar were on that wasn't the Maiden World super far out, the Eldar Amish, was immediately wiped out. The only ones remaining was the residents of Komoa, the Dark Eldar, the Craft Worlds, some of the Craft Worlds, a lot of them were still wiped out, and a lot of the Maiden Worlds. Again, some of them were still wiped out. And so, one thing to know is the Dark Eldar don't refer themselves as the Dark Eldar. They just refer themselves as the Eldar. And they're actually the Eldar majority. There's more Dark Eldar, I think, than any other type of Eldar combined. And so, these 3 types of Eldar, well, there's the Harlequins too, but they have their own god, but we're not going to touch on them too much. There's 4 types of Eldar, and they all had to find their ways to survive Sinesh, because 9 out of 10 Eldar were eliminated. The other 9 constantly had this evil, corrupted Eldar god pulling out their souls. So they had to find ways to protect themselves. The Craft Warders pretty much made spirit stones that could protect their soul from Sinesh. The Exodite would pretty much make a deal with their planets, their somewhat sentient psychic planets, to help protect their souls. The Harlequins had their patron god that was still alive to help protect them, because also, Sinesh also ate most of the Eldar gods, with the exception of Cain, who she shadowed, Isha, which was captured by Nogel, and of course Kegoak, which is, the head honcho of the Harlequins. And so the Dark Eldar, the citizens of Komoa, had no real solution to get Sinesh off of their soul. She was constantly just tugging and nipping at their soul. And so a lot of the Dark Eldar had to relax, and by relax, I mean torturing their slaves, because that's what they were always doing. And that kind of helped make their soul feel better. Because by causing pain and suffering, it was like paying taxes to Sinesh, so that way she would then suck off all the pain and suffering. So essentially, by torturing others, instead of Sinesh feeding off of their psychic residue, and also their souls to an extent, she would then be feeding off of the souls of the mortals that these Eldar were torturing, and feeding off of their psychic residue. And that's why the citizens of Komoa kidnap millions, if not billions, of humans per day, and torture them to death in the most brutal, god-awful ways imaginable. Komoa is the most sick, degenerate society imaginable. If you think Craftworld Eldar are cocky, I guess you can say, like arrogant, the Dark Eldar are, oh my god, the Dark Eldar are a whole different level. The Dark Eldar are the MVPs of racism, prejudice, hatred, and torture. These guys are just the most certified haters. So on the outset, when I first started researching this video, I knew the Dark Eldar are bad, but I thought they were bad because of circumstance. Because, oh yes, we have to torture people so we can stay alive. Good God, no, that's not true. They will go out of their way just to be haters. It is cartoonish the way they will go out of their way to be haters. Like, for example, every single Eldar has to... you can't trust anyone in Komoa. Your best friend, your wife, your husband will betray you at the drop of a hat. There was no trust, no love. It is the most sick, degenerate society imaginable. Worse than Canada. And so, for an elaborate plot, a former Dark Eldar slave led a space marine, okay, this part of the lore actually kind of pisses me off, and I'm going to touch on this later. And I'm going to touch on this on another reason why it's pissed me off later. Eldar homunculi I'm going to touch on them more later. I'm just giving them a very brief thing. Eldar homunculi can respawn you from just a hand. And so, Astrioi Vect, the current leader of the Dark Eldar, back when he was, not the leader of the Dark Eldar, he pretty much tricked a salamander ship into coming into Komoa, pretty much guided it towards all the leaders of the Dark Eldar, and the salamanders genocided them, and then Astrioi Vect, kicked them out of Komoa, and then he became in charge. That pisses me off, because all of these guys had like massive deals with, this homunculi, the guys who can, reform you from a single fingernail. And I think that's just a massive oversight, the fact that not a single one of these eldar were able to come back from the dead. Like, a random eldar comes back from the dead every 5 minutes, but they couldn't bring the leaders back. Okay, that just pissed me off. But anyway, end of tirade. So Astroi Vect is the current leader, and one of the first things he did when he was leader, and this is why the Eldar are such big haters, not just the fact that they torture people, but the fact that they go out of the way just to be cartoonish dickheads. He pretty much went to all of the, his underlings and pretty much said, hey, we can kill an Imperium world every day and it's not going to affect them. I want you guys to strike the biggest blow to the Imperium you possibly can. For no reason, by the way. Because the Dark Eldar need the Imperium to stay alive. Because they feed off of its citizens. And the Imperium is no threat to them because they will just strike the random worlds no one cares about. Take their slaves and leave. They almost never fight the Imperium. Because they can just leave. They can just dip. They can just attack unfortified planets. And if the planets are fortified, they can just leave and find somewhere else. So Astroi Vect was just doing this to be a dickhead. And one of the people he sent out was essentially the head of the gladiators, one of the witches. The gladiators, by the way, are like 90% female. And this witch, they all referred to as witches, went out and found a mechanicum planet that was so heavily guarded. The entire system essentially had all of its military power concentrated on this one forge world, and so she knew something was important there. She pretty much snuck around and heard about that they found an STC. Now, you think this STC, given the fact that she was, trying to steal it or break it, was super important to the Imperium, like it was going to be, some kind of weapon? No. Take guess what kind of devastating device this STC was. It was pretty much super penicillin. It could cause your blood to clot, stopping you from bleeding out. It could save you from almost any disease. It was pretty much just super medicine. And so, she couldn't just brute force take it, because she didn't have enough men, and she couldn't sneak past by herself. So she went to an orc war, shot them from behind, got them to follow her, led them to this planet, got them to crash on the planet, and while the orcs were just crashing out and killing Mechanicum guys, she snuck into the vault where the STC was being held, and found the Archmagos that was guarding it dead, and realized that the orcs had killed him and taken the STC, only taking it because the Mechanicum guy had it, not knowing what it was. So she killed the orcs, took the STC back to Kamora, and broke it. She took it back to Kamora just that way there would be zero chance for the Mechanicum to put it back together. Just super penicillin. Yeah, the Eldar are just kind of dickheads. And so, that's so funny though. That's so funny though. Like, the Eldar are cartoonishly evil, but they're cartoonishly evil for a reason. This is just hating for hate. I gotta say that I was cracking up when this happened. I love that story. That's something they would do. Anyway, the Dark Eldar, on top of the, gladiatorial women. By the way, you do not want to end up in the gladiator pits. I was just touching on, kind of the head honcho gladiator. They're one of the big, waiting factions in the Dark Eldar. The actual, armies and noble families do a lot of waiting, but these guys, when they do waiting, they're mostly waiting. Unlike the rest of the Eldar that mostly just wait backwater planets looking for civilians, these guys will actually wait active war zones, looking for guardsmen, orcs, anything to put in their gladiatorial arenas, to fight each other, to fight random beasts, to fight Tyranids, to fight the Dark Eldar themselves, because Eldar do get the most sustenance from, inflicting pain and torture and fear among creatures to themselves, like one-on-one, skinning session. But they do get similar effects from watching these horrific gladiatorial arenas where they just brutalize these creatures as much as they possibly can. And so, obviously, given that it is still somewhat expensive to go through a human slave every day, being able to fit millions of Dark Eldar into a single arena and torture these humans, torture and, mutilate them in gladiatorial pits, is a lot more efficient. And so, these arenas are kind of the reason Dark Eldar society doesn't completely fall apart. Again, Dark Eldar society, from any, human standpoint, is completely garbage. You'll just be walking and you get stabbed. Kind of like Britain, honestly. Anyway, so these guys will gather up the most horrific things and, watch them fight, kill them themselves. Normal 40k gladiator stuff. They also don't wear any armor. because they rely on absolute speed, and so that's why the oik kind of looks like this. People need to stop gooning. Anyway, next up on our list is the god-awful homunculi. So you know this community post I made? Which one of you sick freaks, honest to God, picked a homunculus to take care of your poor grandma? The homunculus have turned humans into sentient soup, and then drinking it, and then replaced it, while keeping the nerves intact, by the way. While making the nerves so that way they can drink around the nerves so that way they can feel the pain. And the pain never stops. They can also reset your pain index every day so that way they can, continue getting fresh pain. The way they help, bring back Dark Eldar from the dead, which they can do in exchange for either a lot of money or a portion of the Dark Eldar soul, is they will pretty much, they have unlimited, ungodly medical technology, and that's how they do it. But they also pretty much put their cloned body on pain wax that are held right above all their torture victims, like the sentient soup guy, and all that torture pain kind of attracts their soul back to their body. The Dark Eldar are also able to take your skin, your muscles, your tendons, your nervous system, your blood vessels, your bones, and have them on each one of these things will be on a different table, and you will still be alive. Every part of your main system will just be on a different table, somehow hooked up to it, still hooked up to each other, and you will still be alive, feeling every bit of it. These guys are masters of pain. They also are master flesh crafters and can make horrific flesh abominations like these god-awful things known as grotesques. Pretty grotesque. And they make these en masse, and whenever they get bored of, torturing their slaves, mostly human slaves, but these guys have a diversity quota. They have slaves of all walks of life, including, other Eldar. The Eldar servants that disappointed them, random Eldar they found, a lot of humans of all sorts of kinds, space marines, orcs, Tau, and every other sentient waste they can find. And they will blend them all together to make these god-awful grotesque things. These guys have even more of a god complex than the average Dark Eldar. They straight up will look you dead in the eyes and say, follow the Eldar? What do you mean follow the Eldar? We rose. We never fell, we rose. We're better than we've ever been. I'm a god. I'm immortal. Because all the homunculuses are masters of pain and masters of flesh. They're pretty much immortal. Because Dark Eldar still age, even though very slowly. Dark Eldar don't age as long as they'll have consistently more and more pain and suffering added to them. So these guys being the masters of pain in their society are good. Not to mention, because when Dark Eldar die, their souls are claimed by Sinesh, which is something they don't want. That's the worst possible fate for any creature for their soul to be owned by Sinesh. So every Eldar is super submissive to them. Even Astrael Vec, the king of the Eldar, pretty much, gives them more than enough respect. Every single Eldar, from the witches to the cultists to the Dark Eldar nobility, give these guys massive respect. And again, they will look at you and be like, oh yeah, we're woes, we're gods now. I can turn you into whatever I want. I can slice you, do whatever I want to you, turn you into sentient soup. We woes. I no longer rely on those primitive, stupid Eldar gods to keep us alive. I can do that myself now. These guys love the Both of Sinesh. They're probably the only Eldar who, because every single Eldar group, from the witches to every single Eldar group, wants Sinesh gone. Even though, the Dark Eldar are still the general and feed Sinesh, they still kind of want her gone. These guys want her there. Not because they worship her, that because she's there, their gods are gone, so now they can be their own gods. These guys, each one is a Fabius bio-level scientist, degenerate, and just narcissist. It is cartoonish. The Eldar is so evil, they're cartoonish. The homunculi are I love them so much. They're so god-awful, but I just love them so much because of it. And also, to an extent, Kamor is a sentient city. I'm just going to show... I've probably shown a lot of artwork of Komoa itself in this video. And everything is built like that. I don't even know how to describe that. I mean, what even is this? And the city is also infinite and multi-dimensional, to the point where human slaves who gaze upon the city at once sometimes just die or go mentally insane. And the vast majority of their race are pretty much test tube babies that are... They're like bolting their growing process inside the test tube can be sped up to, instead of taking months or years, just taking days, because their society is so degenerate that the second that a dark eldar woman is pregnant and can't defend herself, she immediately gets stabbed and all of her crap taken. So only the super wealthy dark eldar, or, you know, the witches, which the witches are wealthy, but you get what I mean. Only the big royal types that have, you know, big connections with large groups, you know, wealthy families, or, you know, witch cults, are having natural kids. And it's also a huge status symbol, where natural kids will pretty much think all the other dark eldar are just way beneath them. Which really goes to show how little they think of the Monkai. Now, a lot of Dark Eldar did leave, like Levain, and, you know, has joined the Exodites, but because the Exodite story isn't going anywhere, nothing's really been going on in Komoa since Astroyvect. I cannot say that name correctly. Astroyvect has taken over, so really not too much has happened. I really hope more stuff happens. Anyway, I absolutely love the Dark Eldar. I love the witch cults. I just so much love the nobility. Just so cartoonishly petty. I absolutely love the homunculi. I just love the Dark Eldar as a whole. Just how sick and degenerate their civilization is. But, like, you'll just be on a walk, and you'll just watch, like, thousands of Eldar just be killing each other in the street over the most minor of things. I just love them. They're so cartoonishly evil. They do the cartoonishly evil thing a lot better than the Night Lords do, and I love the Night Lords. Anyway, I'm gonna be wrapping up this video. I'm sorry I went on so many unhinged titles, especially right at the beginning. As you can tell, given the fact that I had a 7-part horror series, and I'm doing a YouTube short series, Miss Me with that 40k BS, I truly love Halloween. Halloween is by far my favorite holiday. October is by far my favorite month. Not only because my birthday is on the 5th, it's just the atmosphere. You know, I live in Florida. It's always way too hot. And when it's cold, it's way too cold as a Floridian. I'm not used to the cold. So, Halloween and October type weather, where it's a bit chilly, but not too cold, not too hot, is the best weather. It is just the best time. I love the spooky season. I love Halloween decorations. I love pumpkin carving. I love scary movies. I love Ghostbusters. I love everything. I like the paranormal. I like everything. I like everything about Halloween. Reading all the horror factions during the month of October really made me very happy, except Dead Sky Black Sun. That did not make me happy at all. But I've had so much fun just going on walks, playing games, you know, reading all about these, you know, various factions, especially the Dark Eldar. I probably have enjoyed reading about the Dark Eldar more than any other faction in 40k, which is really weird. In fact, I might actually hop on the Pancreas No Work train on saying that the Dark Eldar are one of my favorite factions, if not outright my favorite faction. I might actually buy their army. Oh god, no. No, but I love Dark Eldar. I love this time of year. And I hope all of you have a happy Halloween. And if you could subscribe, I'm about to hit 300 subscribers. And if you could subscribe and get me to 300 before Halloween, that will just make my month. Thank you so much for watching my video. God bless you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope that none of you end up in the city of Komoa. And I will catch you in the next one. And please remember to comment suggesting the finishing faction in my 7-part horror series. It's been a wonderful ride, and I will catch you in the next one. Hey, just to note, all the cicada sound effects and everything, those aren't sound effects. I just filmed outside right next to my bonfire.